Hello,
Hello,
and welcome to another episode of.
the Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I am Ryan,
I am Eric.
and we are two real life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And if we got a good one for you today, folks.
We sure do. And you know, Ryan, I'm so excited for today's show because data, some people think it's cold, some people think it's unhuman, some people think it's an android trying to become human, all these things. And I'm excited to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we are very excited to welcome to the show Tiankai Feng and to talk about his incredible book, Humanizing Data Strategy. This is a good one, folks, and you're not going to want to miss it. So, reminder, this is a live show. You get your questions and comments into the chat, and we will ask them to Tiankai live as we go through. So, think of this as a Twitch stream and not a boring ass corporate webinar.
That's true.
So, with that said, Eric, Mike Norris, friend of the show. Good to see you, Mike.
Yeah. And if you just want to give a shout out where you're tuning in from, we'll give you a shout out on the stream.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
So, data becoming human.
So making data more human. All right. I think I have a little clip compilation I'm going to play that I think might set the mood.
It is pronounced data.
Oh?
You called me data.
What's the difference?
One is my name. The other is not.
And that makes you more human than any of us.
Sometimes I think he's becoming more human than any of us realize.
Don't try so hard to be human.
Sometimes he wants to be human so badly, he can taste it.
You're much too talented to be human.
I am an android. But I would gladly give it up to be human.
Could this be human joke number 663?
Quite true. I keep trying to be more human.
Brother, I can help you become more human.
Lesson number 1 in becoming more human.
Considered whether data is more human or less human than we want.
Why didn't you give it a more human look, Data?
I have asked myself that many times, as I have struggled to be more human.
All right.
Tiankai, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. That was an amazing clip. Eric, did you edit this yourself? Or
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I put the clips together. So
we have for you to put into this. Very nice.
yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. I wrote a little Python script to search through subtitle files for keywords. Then I put the clips together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, welcome to the Super Data Brothers show. We are super excited to have you here. So, first of all, congratulations on the publishing of your book, Humanizing Data Strategy. So, I read through this, and I'll give the quick review to anyone who's tuning in right now. It's excellent. You should pick it up. So do get it. Before we get started, why don't you kind of give us an introduction to Tiankai Feng? How did you become the sort of person who writes this book?
Sure. I think let me start maybe with the professional public side of myself first, right? So I'm currently working as a data strategy and data governance lead at ThoughtWorks, a consultancy focusing on data and tech bespoke solutions. And before that, I worked at a big sports retailer as in various data roles, including being the head of product data governance and also various other data roles. And so I basically experienced, I would say, data and the failures of data work on the corporate side as well as the consultancy side and looking at clients as well. And I already very early on in my career realized that the people side of data is always the most difficult one. It's also the most neglected one. And it's usually the root cause of many of the problems why a data strategy is not working in the end. So I always kept that with me and I paid a lot of attention to it. It turned into my passion to always address the human side of data a lot more. And when the opportunity arose basically for me to write a book, it was a no-brainer for me to tackle exactly that topic and try to, basically address it and be more practical about it. It's one of those topics when talking to the data community also over the recent years where everyone agrees that the human side of data is important. And you ask everyone says yes. But then there's a gap to not having a lot of practical literature or advice on it anywhere, right? It's just that theoretical concept that, yes, we all agree it's important, but no one knows how to actually do it. And with that book, I really try to then bring it together and break it down into a more practical side of things. Personally, my parents are from China, but I was born and raised in Germany. which being in the 80s, actually growing up here and being born right before the German wall fell, basically, was, let's say, a tricky time to be an immigrant and also to be just different. And that made me also, I would say, someone who wanted to always be more inclusive about everything I do, to be showing that we can go one step to each other and at the same time include others into the way we do things. And that is how I basically, from early on, grew my empathy for things and to be able just to bring people more closer together. So that is kind of the personal motivation of writing that book. And yeah, that's kind of all reflected in the writing style and the content of what's in there.
Yeah, I want to start with that. I mean, so this is one of the most readable data books from a content perspective that I've seen in a long time. So it's it's brief in like the positive sense of brief, right? Brevity is the soul of wit. So it's impactful. The chapters are punchy. Each section is like a little morsel of wisdom. How did you think about structuring a book like this? Like what went into your choice of this writing style and presentation style?
Yes. I think the underlying factor of it all first was that I realized with the people side of things, there's no one size fits all solution, right? And the more I go into detail, I thought to myself, the more I'm forcing a one size fits all approach, like a manual almost, of how exactly to do the steps to bring people on board. But that's not how it works, because every human being is unique and every human being has different experiences. So we need to address it in the right way. So I decided to be a bit shorter. And in the very beginning, I even had the subtitle first being Impulses, How to Lead Data with the Head and the Heart. But that was a little bit too long, and kind of just back and forth with the editors and the publishers, we decided to make it shorter. But I always wanted it to be more of inspirational impulses for people to then additionally think how that applies to their experiences and how to build on it, actually, to then also derive from their own actions. So in a way that I find it really cool how you describe it as morsels. It's like I try to balance it between not being too generic about it, but having like anecdotes and real life examples there, right? But trusting the reader to make the connection to their own situations and their experiences to then learn from it in their own unique way. And yeah, that's quite like it. I think, Ryan, you and I talked about how I would describe it, right? I feel a little bit like after reading it for the first time, you could then the second time go in and have like a choose your own adventure style there, right? So after this, I probably choose now the next one in this other chapter because that fits now to what I have to do next. That could be, of course.
I do think that's how it's written. I mean, it really is kind of these bite-sized, consumable pieces of wisdom about how to think about the human aspect of delivering data. And I do think it's the type of book that people will mark off sections and come back and read those sections over and over again.
Awesome.
And I did that with a few in here. Some of the things I really want to focus on, and so one of the things that stuck out to me so much in reading this was actually how often you talk about the importance of optimism.
Oh, yes.
Could you tell us, like, how does that, so this is a book about data strategy. How does optimism, do you think, fit into a data strategy, and why is it so important?
Right. I mean, besides me being by nature an optimistic person, I think that's how I reflected it also in my writing, right? The main reason I believe is that if we don't believe that things will get better, and in the data space, things get very easily worse than the day before, right? So we need a very strong belief for things to get better. Then why are we doing it in the first place, right? Then what's the motivation even to work in data if we don't believe that things will get better? So I really believe that optimism is like a really human trait, to believe not only that things will get better, but that you can take actions to make it better, right? And in my book, I differentiate between active optimism and passive optimism, right? Where passive optimism means you just sit back and wait for the good thing to happen, which most likely will not happen. And active optimism means taking actions to make it the best possible outcome and trying your best to make it work. And afterwards, you can still say, if it didn't work, at least I tried, right? And I think this is why I'm so passionate about that, optimism being part of it. It's also related to that, I call it toxic positivity, right, versus realistic optimism, because the other extreme of it is that we ignore all of the bad things and only say positive things, right? Everything is fine. Everything is great. Look how great the dashboards are working. And you basically don't talk about the bad data quality and everything else that is not working, right?
You don't talk about the Kraken lurking underneath those dashboards.
Exactly. And that is creating a toxic thing, because then no one wants to speak up anymore about the bad things and everyone tries to ignore it, but it will only accumulate, right, over time, the bad things. And at some point you will not be able to save it anymore. And realistic optimism is the opposite, where also it's more about acknowledging things that are not bad, but then applying the optimism to make it better and believe that it's going to get better and take actions to make it better. So yeah, that's my main take on optimism as the important part of data work.
Yeah, and it just comes up, that you got some explicit sections about it in here, but then it comes up over and over, and I would say it pervades the book as a whole. Like there is an optimistic feeling. I feel one of the things about this book that's a little unique in the data industry is how much of your personality is in it. Was that an intentional strategy that you used when writing this?
Strategy is a big word in this context.
Let me ask you this: was it even something you could resist, or is it just,
I would rather say I started writing and realized that this is very uniquely my style, and I didn't want to be less authentic, basically, right? And I realized that I could force myself to be more, let's say, academic about it. Probably I could force myself to write it more in like a very formal way, but it would take away from the message that I want to give, right? And a message always has the what and the how, right? And the what is pretty clear to me, but the how means also I want to transport it in a way that is me, and that hopefully encourages others to do it their own way too. So yeah, it never was in the end an option for me to do it differently, I would say. I just acknowledged that I was writing it in that style and just kept on doing it because I thought it was the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think it worked. I think it's a great pairing of style and substance in this book. So let's talk a little bit about the overall thesis of the book, right? What you argue in here is that, if I can sum it up, I would say it's that in order for a data strategy to be successful, you need to think about more than just the pipelines and the tooling and the integrations and the cloud platforms, but that rather you need to think about the human beings who are involved in the data strategy. And that your definition of that, oftentimes people will say, yeah, we need to think of our users, and that's in here. But you also talk a lot about all the stakeholders, including the data team themselves and what they need as human beings.
Absolutely.
And you break that down into kind of what you call the 5 C's. Could you describe to people what are the 5 C's of data strategy?
Absolutely. So the 5 C's that I try to bring as close as possible to the practical side of things are competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. And basically, the idea behind it is that with those 5 C's, they are closely tied to not only human needs and human traits, right, all 5 of them, but they are also having a direct impact on business outcomes and business value. So being basically a bridge between the human side and the business side, in quotation marks. With competence, for example, I mean that it's not enough to only focus on data literacy. That's something that was a buzzword over the last years and continues to be one. But we should also expect data professionals to be better in business expertise, right? And taking one step to each other to then have a holistic understanding and being able to speak the same language and not just expecting one to learn your language until you can finally talk to them, right? It's also about not only to have the right skills when it comes to the hard skills of data, right? But that you also need different skills because data professionals have a lot of different tasks to do that are different, right? Being a negotiator, being a leader, right? Being sometimes a communicator, and all of these kind of roles are also part of any data jobs nowadays, and that requires some intentional upskilling and practice for people as well. And yeah, with collaboration, right? It's more about that we should have collaboration rooted in shared goals and common ground, rather than always talking about me versus the others. And there's one particular aspect I'm calling out, right, which is the topic of service versus self-service, right? Basically saying that you have a centralized service team in the past, and now we're all going for self-service to federate and decentralize more. But no matter in what direction you go, there's always a mismatch with expectations, right? It's either the service is not good enough, not fast enough, or the self-service capabilities are not strong enough or not good enough. I still need someone else to do it. And I basically propose common ground and a mindset of co-creation, right? Which means no matter in what way you're working, co-creation means you are together having one goal that you're going for, and you have clear accountabilities who's contributing to it in what way. And that ideally as a mindset can then go in different ways as well. And for communication, that is probably part that is well self-explanatory in it all. It goes into storytelling. It goes into the framing of the value of data. That should be not only on organizational level, because that's the rational way of talking about value. It should also be on personal level, right? Which means that how it impacts individuals, such as not needing to clean data anymore regularly, or not be having to manually monitor something anymore, but being able to just automate it, for example. All of that are individual values that should be also communicated, targeted to different audiences. For creativity, I argue that creativity is the human trait that everyone has. It's a muscle that we can all train, and it's more about applying it in the right way. And creativity is the human trait that's the origin of innovation, right? We have new ideas and we want to apply them, and this is how organizational innovation happens. And that should happen specifically in the data space too. And lastly, conscience, which is closely connected to compliance and governance and all these topics. I am basically arguing that there are so many different types of considerations and concerns we have now about data, such as ethical considerations, privacy-related considerations, AI and autonomy-related considerations now as well, that we need more cross-functional oversight, and keeping the human in the loop, especially in the beginning when we start doing innovation things, is really important, because otherwise we might have irreversible damage afterwards that we cannot afford to have afterwards anymore. So yeah, so kind of that's very much in a nutshell. I think you want to probably go more into detail on all of this, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the key.
We've got a few comments. Tiankai should come to Day-to-Day Texas. It doesn't say, but I can guess who that is.
Yeah, that's Lynn Bender.
That's Lynn. That's got to be Lynn. Doesn't
Friend of
say
the
it.
show
But
and Day-to-Day Texas organizer.
Yeah, I even got a message from him already personally. So yeah, I'm very eager to join. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then we have got another comment, which I think you just basically finished summarizing, or what are the characteristics of a data-driven company, right? I think you just described it with your C's.
That is true. On the other hand, maybe one point to it is I actually go into what the difference between data-driven, data-informed, and data-inspired is as well, right?
Okay.
Because I feel like that the word data-driven might be overused a little bit in this context, right? I basically say that we, depending on what data is available and how much we want to be influenced in our decisions, there's different degrees of how to do it. And data-driven for me really means that we are using an automated way of letting an algorithm or a model just do the decision for us completely, right? Like dynamic pricing, for example, on e-commerce is one of those examples where just based on specific parameters, it just adjusts the price on its own. And you very rarely go in to adjust it anymore manually. It's really going on its own. Data informed is a little bit more the equal match of your own expertise based on your experience with data that is supporting you, so you can actually combine it. And it's still a human decision. You're just better informed, right? And data inspired actually means that there's no data that actually is directly relating to your decision that you need to make. It's like a very innovative decision you have to make. Like I made the example in the book about the metaverse back in the years and not knowing if you should go in there or not. There's not a lot of empirical data to support your decision or not, but you kind of try to go for other data sources to extrapolate from there if you should do it or not and what decision to take. But having that thought that everything should be data-driven in a company is probably a little bit too extreme, right? Think about all the decisions being just made by automated algorithms. That's probably not going to work. So I'm kind of just trying to make this proposal to think about what decisions should be data-driven and which ones should be rather informed or inspired. And you will always have different decisions that are changing. And it should be just more conscious of how you let it influence you.
Yeah, there's definitely an impulse to, especially now that we have these AI systems and everybody can imagine, oh, we could automate this with the AI and we could automate that with the AI. How do you, what advice would you give to someone who's having that impulse or maybe having that argument with their boss about like, what is the right level? You know, how do you know when like, yes, maybe we should try to automate this, or this is worth putting an AI agent behind versus no, like we need human in the loop for this.
Right. I mean, I could probably argue with like a whole AI governance process in this, but I'm not going to do that. And this is probably something that a lot of people are doing and working on already. But I would actually go for a very simple thought experiment, which is just having the thought, what is the worst that could happen if you automate this, right? And be really comprehensive about the worst case scenarios of something going wrong and what consequences that could have for individuals, for the organization, and for society in some cases even, right? And think about if that is a very likely scenario or not, and if there's anything you can do to prevent it, and to then go for the prevention of these issues before you go into that conversation. I think we are very much blinded by the opportunities right now, right, of AI, and this is how all of these conversations happen, but we are not spending enough time with the risks. So just having that more balanced approach, right, to focus and be amazed by the opportunities there, but just spend a little bit more time on the risks and the worst case scenarios probably helps you make a more balanced decision about these things.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I think people there is a lot of pressure to just do something with AI right now, right?
And
just do something.
And one thing I've noticed is that that people tend to think that like what would be easy to automate is the annoying part of someone else's job that you interact with, right? because you don't understand the complexity of their things. Like it's HR. How hard could it be just to have an AI bot do it, right? Because it's like it's not your job, so you don't understand it. It's this is actually quite complex human endeavor. So you're like, oh, just automate it, right?
Right. That's very interesting. I think there's almost like also the reflection of your personal issues with other people in collaboration, where you would wish that the other person is just a bot and not a human being with its own point of view. So it just follows your orders and works with you no matter what, right?
Yeah.
I see that reflected a lot in these kind of scenarios too.
You know, one of the things I've always done over the course of my career is really be mindful of the fact that the business people I'm working with have as much expertise or more expertise in their area than I do in data. Mm-hmm. And just as when they come to me with data requests, sometimes it sounds to me, oh, this is easy, or they could have done this themselves, or they don't get X, Y, or Z. If you were to thrust me into their world, I would be just as baffled.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you. And I think that when business people already are making the effort to explain something to you, how they are working, then this is already, we should be really grateful about this, right? Because they're letting us into how they are doing things. And they don't necessarily always have to have the motivation to do that. So I always see that as a good sign that if they open up to tell me what their day-to-day looks like proactively and what kind of decisions they need to make, that then I can let them into how my day-to-day as a data person looks like. So maybe we find some common ground, right? Maybe we have some very similar patterns of issues that we're dealing with, and bonding over challenges and bonding over similar frustrations usually helps to then create a stronger bond anyway, right? So it's really good.
I think that leads us to one of the things I found really intriguing about the book, and that was the section about, and you touched on it already, but the difference between service and self-service and kind of, we talk about this a lot here on Super Data Brothers, and many of our guests have opinions about how to handle centralization and decentralization and service versus self-service. You had this idea of co-creation. Can you explain that?
Exactly. So, I mean, I basically, I'm saying that the service and self-service, and no matter in what degree you're doing it, and no matter in what way you're implementing it, it by nature and by the word, the nature of the word has a transactional nature, right? It's like I give something to you and you give me something back for it, and then the service is done, right? And with self-service is even I give you the capabilities of services, you use it, and then the transaction is done. But if we really want to have a sustainable and a strong collaboration between people, it should be rooted in trust, not just in transactions being more and them being finished. And I'm not suggesting that co-creation is a new way of interacting. It's more of a mindset that should change to say, if we are co-creating, then we have shared goals and we are all contributing together towards something that we have in common, right? And no matter then if you're a service or self-service, if you have common goals and shared goals, then ideally the motivation is higher to do it together. And you don't have that you are supposed to give me this point of view, but how can we help each other reach it together mindset, which should really help. And I feel like, I mean, this is also interestingly the chapter that I'm being basically messaged about the most, of that ringing all of a sudden a bell and blowing people's minds that I never thought about it that way, because those words, service and self-service, have been so established that they just never thought about changing it or bringing it up in a different way. But it's a very simple thing of just changing minds and being a little bit different in the way we set objectives to then create that collaboration in a better way.
If someone's in a situation where they don't feel they have that, let's say they read your book, they say co-creation sounds amazing, but we're not there right now. We have some strict service model, or, you know, we prep the data sets and then someone else builds the dashboards, and like, we don't know what or why they're doing. How do you make that move? What's the first step as a data practitioner to try to move in the direction of co-creation?
Yeah, I mean, it might sound very cheesy and simple, but I think an open conversation would really help, right? Just go beyond that usual day-to-day of looking into your backlog of tickets that you're doing and working on the backlog of user stories. Have a conversation with the stakeholders and try to find out where you have common ground, right? So basically saying, look, we have been working for a while, not everything is going well. I feel like we should find some common ground. I'd rather like to co-create with you rather than just only transaction these kind of services. So how can we do this? Can we share a little bit more about what we're working on? What are our objectives for the next weeks, months, years? Where can we contribute together to then share the achievement of having done something together? And just open that up, right? And I think if anyone would reject that kind of a approach to have a talk, that would be pretty ignorant, right? I think this is a very nice way of starting a conversation. If someone wants to help you and actually wants to work with you on a human level, why should I reject it? So it's both an icebreaker and a great opener for a conversation to go in that direction more.
What do you, oh, we have a comment here. Aubrey, thanks for tuning in again. Nice to hear from you. So Aubrey says, I love how Tiankai is leading with kindness and curiosity to find common ground. I love collaboration.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
How do you, you mentioned kind of tickets, this idea of, many data teams, especially in very large organizations, are stuck in this mode of just taking tickets. Yeah. And I think in the book, you don't say that's unimportant, right? You don't say, stop thinking about service and stop doing tickets. That's not your take on it. But you kind of advocate that your measure of worth as a data team needs to go beyond just the number of tickets that you're able to service in a particular time frame. So, how should data teams think about that, do you think?
Right. So, I mean, I think with tickets and ticketing systems, they are generally a great way to manage your workload, right? At least you have a structured way to look at all the requests that come in, all the things that the business might require, and you can measure at least time spent on things. And all of that is good. At least it helps you to, on a meta level almost, right, to manage your work in a more data-driven way. And that's fine and that's good. It's rather about that if we now treat tickets as the only way of collaboration, then you're losing the human touch, very simply, right? You're hiding behind a form, basically, that everyone should fill in. Worst case scenario, somebody contacts you in an email with a very personal and nice email, and you say, please fill out this form. I'm not going to talk to you unless you fill this form in. You destroy all of the human touch of it, right? But it's what actually the human touch that makes us successful being motivated to work on things in the first place, right? If you only ask people to fill in forms that usually are having aspects of very rational aspects, you don't get all of the human context, you don't get all of the motivation of the requester or the person who's working on it in the first place too, right? And what I'm basically saying is, do your ticketing systems and start documenting things, but don't take it as an excuse to not talk to each other anymore, right? You always need a little bit more of clarification. Sometimes it's nice to also just tell someone in person that something is finished and not just an automated Jira a notification by email that something is finished too, right? And kind of just have that conversation and to balance it out. That's it.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think I can think back to times in my career where it was very much like someone comes to your desk and says, "Hey, can you do this?" And our standard policy on the data team was, "Well, fill out the ticket and then I'll think about it."
in 3 months.
Right.
I'll think about it in 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was in that situation too, right? And I think it's normal. You cannot just have everyone expect that they come to you and you immediately start working on things just because someone said so. But at the same time, right, it's more about expectation management, but that can happen in a human level too. It's not about using then a ticket as an excuse to not having to work on it. It's more about, let's talk about it. Right now is not a good time. But maybe you fill in this form and then let's pick up this form together in a proper conversation to deal with it, right? And that is also fully acceptable. Exactly.
Yep, we got another.
Yeah, Maria says forms are for formalizing and recording things, but definitely not an excuse to avoid speaking directly and building relationships. Love it.
Exactly.
Thank you for the comment, Maria.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, it would be fun if you could build a relationship via the comments of a ticket, right? That would be a first. That's very passive-aggressive words. Do we have an update on this? No. Do we have an update on this? No.
That's how the AIs will build relationships, and the whole conversation will happen in less than a second.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How
it'll develop their own little language.
Yeah, they will. How should data teams think about, you talk in the book a little bit about the different types of requests that data teams get and how to handle that. I think you use the term demand management at one point in the book. How should data teams think about that? You think a data team is getting all sorts of requests from all sorts of stakeholders. How should they go about managing that and prioritizing it?
Yeah. I mean, I think generally there's I would say maybe two different types of requests and all solutions that are the solutions to the request. There's either very high effort disruptive things that require a lot of efforts to then implement because it's something completely new, or it's incremental only, right? Where it's just taking something that exists already, slightly adjust it, and then bring it up as a new solution for the stakeholders. And having that estimation not only on workload level, but also on what the implications are if you bring in something completely new versus something incremental should have a consequence in how you engage with the stakeholders too, right? With something that's completely disruptive and completely new, it probably requires some more communication on if that's actually needed that way and what actually the expected outcome is. Versus if someone just asks for, could you maybe just expand that one table now with one more attribute that is derived from that other attribute, it doesn't require that much communication. But spending more time on demand management and identifying those patterns and having like just a clearer differentiation of under what circumstances you should collaborate in different ways, I think is really important, and not to force everything into one way of working with those requests, but rather a bit more of a differentiated approach.
Yeah. There's a strong tendency amongst some data people to come up with the way it's done and then always do it the way it's done, right?
Yes.
And I think you have to apply a little wisdom and recognize that different approaches are going to work for different scenarios or people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I do also think, as someone who is working a lot in data governance, right, that I do understand that processes are important and that they are defining them upfront is then saving a lot of time afterwards. But especially with a world that's changing very quickly, such in the data, you cannot have the processes too rigid, right? You always need to leave some space for flexibility and to adjust it in the right way to then be able to deal with it when it comes. Because otherwise, you will not just end up with everyone being dissatisfied and everyone blaming each other for something not working just because you try to stick to the one process that you had defined 2 years ago, right? So that should not happen. Yeah.
Now that kind of leads me to another really interesting part of the book. You mentioned data governance, and I think I don't want to give anybody the impression that this book is in any way unserious on more
Yeah.
technical topics or things like data governance. Like it's this loosey goosey feelings book. You're very clear in this over and over again about the value of data governance, and I think that ties into this idea you have about the action fallacy and how that relates to data teams. Could you explain the action fallacy and what the implications that has for data governance?
Absolutely. So the action fallacy basically says that human beings care more about the heroes that save the day, and don't care at all about the people who ensured that the day never needed saving in the first place, right? So it's really the whole prevention versus mitigation topic, right? That if everyone is aware that the issue happened, and then someone swoops in and finally solves that issue, he's being celebrated, she's being celebrated, and everyone is hooray. But if somebody made sure that it never happened, right, and that person never talks about it, then no one will ever know that it was prevented. But it might have taken a lot of efforts to actually prevent it, and it prevents sustainably all the future similar issues that are happening. And a lot about data governance is about preventing issues, right? It's about putting guardrails on. It's about enforcing policies that bad things don't happen. And effective data governance means that most issues are prevented and not mitigated after the fact. And that means and implies that we should also see prevention as a value. And it's our duty and almost a mandate to communicate prevention as a value too, and not just the mitigation of issues. And that needs to become a mindset overall in data things, because we all know that data issues, cleaning them up afterwards is always more expensive anyway than having prevented them in the first place. And that applies specifically to data governance too.
Yeah. It's
we got another comment here. So from Maria, I find governance is selling the dream long before you can get there. So how do you keep people believing in that dream after some time?
That's a great question. I mean, and that's a little bit maybe beyond what I read on the book, but I think the most common mistake with data governance is that you try to boil the ocean at the very beginning. What that means is people often try to set up all of the data governance mechanisms from scratch holistically across the whole organizations, as basically splitting all of the data domains up, assigning all of the data ownership and data stewardship, writing all of the policies, and then say, okay, now we can start to data governance. And until you reach that point, you have maybe passed 1 or 2 years, basically, right, to actually do it. And by that time, people don't know why so much time was invested in data governance. No value came out of it. So why are we even doing it? And I'm always saying that it should be actually more of a think big but start small approach, right? And rather apply data governance on use cases first, and then step-by-step incrementally roll it out, and then turn it into a bigger picture and a bigger data governance framework afterwards. But you should start solving issues first and not just starting defining things. Defining things should be part of the solution of an issue and not just something you do because it's what academically data governance is defined as. So that's kind of what I think is the right approach. If you can prove data governance value by solving issues, and you do it more frequently because you do it use case based, then people will not lose their belief in data governance.
I pulled out a quote here from the book that I think applies to this conversation. You say, no matter how much we want to enforce the right behavior, when it comes to data, people will always find a way to go around the enforcement mechanisms. So the only way to make the right behavior last is through intrinsic motivation. This requires a clear understanding of the benefits and implications of dealing with data in the right way.
Absolutely, yes.
So I want to talk a little bit, shifting gears away from governance. There's the section about creativity. Mm-hmm. This is something that I talk a lot about on our show. My background is actually in playwriting and acting. Mm-hmm. And so
that's why he's doing all the talking and I do all the technical stuff.
Yeah, this is the right brain versus left brain, brother, is really what that is. But the section on creativity I thought was very refreshing. And one of the things that I think people are starting to recognize the value of that in data, I think more and more. But many data people maybe don't know how to go about building that creativity muscle. As you said, all humans have it, right? So if you're a data person watching this and you think, oh, I'm just not a creative person, that's not true. But maybe you need to develop that. How should people go about developing that in data, but also in life?
Yes, I mean, I think so. With creativity, I think my background, first of all, is that when I had performance reviews, creativity was always pointed out as a positive aspect of mine. And especially being someone working in data, it was always pointed out as something unexpected, right? And the like metaphorical statement was, paraphrasing, is for a data person, you're so creative. That is kind of the statement that I got off of, right?
I've heard that too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah,
Ooh, it's a little less of a compliment than you might think it is.
It's a little bit passive aggressive too. No, but backhanded, right? But what I think is it is true, because data roles and data professions are not seen or perceived as creative, because they're very analytical by nature, right? And what I do think is that creativity comes in different ways, and I basically imply there are two different creativity types. One is that it's more spontaneous creativity, and then there's solution-driven creativity, right? The one that's more arts focused is the spontaneous creativity. That's like that genius spark that you get, that all of a sudden you invent a new style of drawing or something, right? But solution-driven creativity means you reflect on things, you brainstorm, and you actually come up with a new idea how to solve a problem that you didn't use before. And that is the part, I believe, that gets you started in being creative as a data person too, right? Reflecting on what the challenges are currently in a day-to-day, pick any of those challenges and just have a new idea about how to solve that challenge. That might be a new way of coding, that might be a more efficiency uplift in a certain workflow that you're working on. It might be a new way of communicating with a certain stakeholder that you haven't considered before. All of that, the moment you have that idea and you apply it, means you have been creative and you apply that creativity in a different way. And over time, it builds up confidence, right? The more you be creative, the more you actually can see more opportunities to be creative. And ideally, that is training that creativity muscle. And that leads to a collective creativity, then hopefully leading to innovation as well.
Yeah, common sense is the enemy of creativity. Love that. Sorry, I'll stop comment spamming now. No, Marie, we love it when people comment. So feel free, please.
Keep
please.
It
makes it much more fun for us too. So
absolutely,
comment spam away, please.
Yeah. You do you now? One of the things that I often tell people to do, and I'm curious about Tiankai the person. Like, are you creative? What do you do to be creative outside of work? I understand you're a musician, but like, one of the things I encourage data people to do sometimes is I say, like, you need to read books, and they can't be data books. That's the rule, right? And they should preferably be fiction. But if you want to read a biography or something, that's okay. That's okay. But like, you should be reading some fiction, as a way to learn about other people, right? What do you do to stay creative and keep in touch with the other humans around you?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I do think having good conversations with other people and not about data, actually, and on a very related note, is really training my brain to think in different ways, right? And that might be very different topics, just like day-to-day, like sports and doing things together. Having game nights, I like to do, having a lot too, and that is always like board games and stuff, always activates your brain a different way, because it's always human interactions too, right? So you kind of have to improvise a lot in different situations. What I do also think right now for me is keeping my kids entertained, to be honest, right? So my kids are 5 and 3. They're the best audience for my creativity, right? I'm often doing this thing now where if they don't want to do something, I just improvise a new song on the piano for them, and it really makes them happy till they do it. Like yesterday, I basically sang a song about how they should eat their broccoli, and I just did the whole like piano performance for them, and they
Did it
found
work?
it so funny that they actually ate a few of those. Right. But this is the thing, right? Where you will always find ways how to be creative. You can always apply in different ways. It's more about being comfortable doing it, and the more comfortable you get, the more confident you get, and then you kind of do it more and more.
Yeah, I will tell you as a fellow dad that is A+ dad work there. Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. I never see you playing piano and singing, Ryan. I think maybe you need to step it up.
I'm the only person in the family who can't play piano.
Oh wow, really?
I mean, in my kids are my wife's quite quite good, and
Nice.
all my children are taking piano, and I have no talent in that regard yet. One of the things you talk about in the book too, so it's kind of a two-parter, but you talk at one point about, good data culture,
Mhm.
and you say that good data culture needs to be modeled in order to thrive. What is a good data culture, and how do you model it?
I think you're referring to the role modeling it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, basically, the idea is that talking about a good data culture is very common nowadays, but it's almost often expected that it just happens, and that the right people who are on the operational side, they're just going to do it, and then the culture overall will improve. But from just knowing how culture in an organization works, it has to come from the top down too, right? So you need those enthusiasts from the bottom up, but you need also the role models top down that show you that it's appreciated and that it's being done in a certain way by them. And by that, I mean just the good data culture really means just take, I learned that as a statement, to treat data as a first-class citizen, right? And not just as an afterthought or something that is very techy and we don't have to deal with it in our business day to day. Just make it more part of it. Make it part of business, right? And that can be very easy to just quantify business outcomes and using more of a data language. When you talk about performance, for example, it might mean that you use more facts and figures to also describe the technology enablement of your organization as well. But any kind of as senior as possible role modeling can really help to make that culture happen in a better way. And that might also mean that there should be a more clarification to the leaders how they should role model it and what a good data culture can lead to for them and what the benefits for them to then drive it that way.
Sometimes people try to build a data culture without buy-in from leadership. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to work, right? Because if you don't get that buy-in from the leadership, it will always feel like something that you're trying to do in secret, almost. It's like, I've been working on this data culture project with everyone, but I don't want the leaders to know and invest in it. Let's just try it anyway. And a culture just doesn't work that way, right? It needs everyone's involvement. And by doing it and getting it, the leadership involved, they can hopefully be part of it.
Aaron Wilkerson adds here, I also do not play piano.
Nice, Aaron.
Thanks for tuning in, Aaron. Aaron is the head of data governance at Carhartt. So it might be interesting, Aaron. If you're interested, pick up a copy of this. I would be keen to get your feedback on it, and if it sparks any creative thoughts for you at the next Detroit Data Meetup coming up in at the end of October.
Right. I did meet Aaron at the DJIQ last year in San Diego. So we did meet in person. It was very cool to hang out with him.
Good. Yeah,
cool.
Aaron's an awesome guy.
Yes,
we love him.
And
then we got Pete saying, I took piano lessons as a kid. My mom said I had big hands and long fingers. I should be good at it. I wasn't.
It's like every tall person should play basketball. It's the same logic, right?
Exactly. So we've got about 10 minutes left, folks. First of all, buy the book. Do buy the book. It is it's a pleasure to read. It's very engaging. I think great advice and very thought provoking. And you can really read it in one sitting. You can. It's not like, say, Zhamak's book, which is also excellent, but you're going to need to spend 3 weeks digesting. You can read this. So check it out. If you have any other questions for Tiankai, we respond to questions. So get them in now. And
we've got about 10 minutes left. So just if you are interested in the book, we've got links in the comments and we've got links in the YouTube description. So just go use those links, and then you should be able to purchase the book. And for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, we are the Super Data Brothers. We have interesting guests like Tiankai on every week Thursday at noon Eastern. So please feel free to tune in. Usually Thursday. I know this is a Wednesday and I'm saying Thursday, but that's just how it worked out.
Yeah.
So normally on Thursday, but this is a special Wednesday show.
So with the 10 minutes we have left, let's say somebody reads the book and they say, I really am bought in. I like the ideas here, but I have no idea how to start bringing them into my workplace. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think whatever you, as a reader, then feel like is resonating with you, try to realize what are the biggest problems you currently have, and then pick the right part of it to then try applying it. Right? I think I might be addressing the most common data problems that I have seen with the human aspect of it all and how to work with humans to solve these problems. Right? But it doesn't mean that everyone has exactly the same set of problems in the same degrees that I've experienced it, right? So depending on what you're going through right now and where you see the immediate need and the value of applying some of the principles and approaches that I'm proposing in my book, just give it a try, right? With most of the things that I'm doing in there, there's always an easy way to get started and not blow it up too big, right? You can always try it out on a much smaller scale with one stakeholder or just with one small project to get started and see if it works or not. I'm not asking anyone to completely transform the whole organization just to be able to apply that book. So you will realize as a reader that all of those can start in a smaller manner, and it's just about wanting to try it and see how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's almost it's not so much and I think this is probably intentional. I mean, it's not like a comprehensive and prescriptive guide on how to humanize data strategy.
Right.
And I think that's probably because such a thing is not possible, right?
Yes.
Like you're dealing with people.
Exactly.
Right? And there is no comprehensive and prescriptive guide. Rather, this I think very clearly lays out the challenging scenarios that we have in data with the human aspect of data, and then provides suggestions on how to handle those scenarios. And so there's a high likelihood that the scenario you're encountering is represented in here, I would say.
Exactly.
And then you can, and it's just very practical and directly written about like how to think about things, rather than a prescriptive, this is a data mesh and here are the principles of data mesh and here's how you organize a data mesh, which, we're data mesh fans on the show, but that's more of a, you're either doing it or you're not sort of thing.
That's true.
And this is not like that. So yeah, absolutely. Just give it a shot.
Absolutely. I also think that the 5 C's, they make it sound like a super academic framework, but it really isn't, right? It's more of a memory device for you to just keep in mind what the 5 C's are, and then hopefully take it as a bridge to remember some of the things that I write about. It derives from the 5 C's most likely.
Right. Yeah, definitely do not take it as like, okay, first you have to master the first C.
Yeah.
Then you move on to the second C.
Second C. It's like it's waterfall. You just want one C to the other.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, to wrap it up, I mean, there's a couple, kind of two questions I'd like to wrap it up with, and they're a little bigger topics, maybe. We'll see. But what do you think is the biggest challenge facing the data industry right now and the data practitioners you work with?
Yes, I think at least right now, there are two things. One is the hype around AI that is still not slowing down, right? It's driving a lot of the demands toward data. And right now, after a lot of public failures around generative AI use cases, right, there's a lot more focus on data quality and using data in the right way for the right AI applications. And those, I think, will create challenges because the expectation is really high. And because the hype is so high, everyone expects the data to improve magically as quickly as possible. But that, as we know, is not going to go well. So dealing with that pressure is one thing. And the other thing is also pressure, and also from external sides, but that should be, I think, ethical and regulation-related considerations, right? Especially in Europe, with the EU Data Act, EU AI Act, and all of these regulations being in place and getting more and more strict. That is a whole environment that needs to be navigated, right? And that is, from a pessimistic point of view, hindering innovation. But from a just data governance point of view, I would say it's a necessary thing to do the right things. And we should all be careful and just establish a way of working with the law and with the regulations rather than trying to go around them, right? And that, I think, is creating a very different challenge again, because that requires a lot more cross-functional understanding and cross-functional collaboration and organization that was never as in demand as right now.
What do you think, when it comes to the AI piece, how do you recommend people, like, if they are feeling pressure to just do something with AI, how should they navigate that?
I think and this is just based on the Gartner study that happened, I think, in May, right? Where the biggest pain point of AI applications is unclear value of AI applications, which basically means if we have all tried the exciting stuff of AI, then we're all wondering, so what did we get from it, right? Besides just playing with a fancy toy. So what now? And tying it to business objectives itself takes time and efforts to do it, right? And so basically understanding what the problems are that the business is trying to solve, and then to see if AI is the right solution for that problem or anything else could actually solve it in a much easier way. All of that needs to be done to then realize the value of an AI application. And I don't think everyone will disagree to say, before we jump into all of the AI exciting things, how does this tie to business value? And just by asking that question, no one will say we shouldn't care about business value, because that's the wrong thing to say in an organization. So you kind of automatically put everyone in the mindset, let's think about this a little bit more and then do it. And then you can actually establish more of a cross-functional thinking and oversight again.
I think that's very wise advice. Just to fall back to the business value and say, hey, right? Because you're right. Nobody will say, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Business value, we're not about that here.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's not this company.
We want to blow $100 million on a toy.
Yeah, exactly.
So the last question then before we wrap up here, and I want to thank you for a fascinating conversation and congratulate you again on the book. We highly recommend it here at the Super Data Brothers Show. Do pick up a copy. It's well worth a read. You will be glad you did. What advice do you have for a young person or maybe a career switcher who is entering the data industry today?
That's a good question. I would say, just based also on my own experiences, it's never too early to start caring about the business side of data, I would say. And by that, I mean that I think there's this notion that to start being a data professional, you need to really invest into the hard skills, learn SQL, learn Python, and learn all of the other tools that are out there to really be able to start. And that is important too. But you should never forget to also care about the business side of things, because this is the part that will make you more successful, right? If you can always attribute what you're working on to a certain business stakeholder or a certain business process or like a certain business objective, and you understand how it works, then you will always follow the value, right? And rather than just following the daily grind of what you need to do operationally. So having that business acumen from the very beginning and trying to understand the bigger picture whenever you have a chance as a career starter in this, do it. Like, take that advantage and try to be more business driven too.
So don't just try to be the Python expert, but be the person who understands why we're writing the Python.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, great. Well, I think that's good advice and a good place to wrap it up. Tiankai, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. It was awesome having you on here. Once again, everybody, Tiankai's book, Humanizing Data Strategy, huge stamp of approval from the Super Data Brothers. Do pick up a copy. It is well worth the read. I think very thought-provoking and a huge contribution to the conversation we're having in data right now. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks. So that was an awesome interview. He is a cool dude.
Yeah.
All right. So, hey, if you enjoyed this, we normally broadcast on Thursdays at 12 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central European time. We are the Super Data Brothers. Thank you for joining us. Next week, at our regular scheduled time, we have Makiko Baisley on to talk about advances in AI and ML and where is all this crazy stuff going. I'm thrilled to have her on. I've been trying and wishing to have Makiko on the show for like a year and a half. And so it's really awesome to finally get her on. So tune into that next week, folks. It's going to be a good one. And let's see, anything else we should mention before we go? Yeah. YouTube.com/C/Super Data Brothers for the back catalog. We have at this point
archive of all of our streams.
Yep.
We have like what
I don't know.
50?
Yeah, there's a lot of data wisdom in the backlog. So do check it out, everybody. All right. Anything else we got to share with the people, Eric?
No. Real quick, there's another Detroit low-key data meetup, October 30th, 6 to 8 p.m. McShane's Irish Pub in Detroit.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're interested, show up.
I'm going to go dressed as an executive from a software vendor trying to sell you things.
Oh, really? So,
Yeah, so I'm going to look exactly like this.
Exactly like this. Or like that.
Not a joke, folks. It is a non-salesy. There will be no
Yeah.
sales pitch at the Detroit
Yep.
Data Meetup. So join us October 30th. Aaron Wilkerson, be there. You're welcome to fly into Detroit. I promise you, it's much better than you think. So come in and join us at the Detroit Data Meetup. And then, until next time, we are the Super Data Brothers. I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we will see you next week at 12 o'clock to talk to Mikiko. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.